All right. Well, as all of our guests file here into our virtual room, welcome all you Ultimate Disco Cruise fans. I am Jason Venner, your virtual cruise host. It is so great to see and be seen by so many of you. Obviously, most of you have cruised with us before, and by us, I mean StarVista Live and/or the Disco Cruise specifically. Some of you are new, not new to StarVista, but new to the Disco Cruise, and some of you are new altogether. StarVista Live's Disco Cruise would be your first cruise with them. So regardless if this is your first, your second, your third, or your 10th cruise within the family, welcome. Very, very glad to have you. Thank you for tuning in. Obviously, we started doing these when all the questions popped up. We're dealing with a world of uncertainty right now, and we thought this was a great opportunity to sit down with the two gentlemen who have all the answers and to allow them to chat with you, answer some of your questions, let you know exactly what's going on from the StarVista Live side of things. Joined by two gentlemen here. Right next to me is Mike Jason. Mike Jason, Senior Vice President and Executive Producer of many of the StarVista Live cruises. Mike, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Jason. Glad to be here.
And we also have Mr. Alan Rubens, as Senior Vice President of StarVista Live, Executive Producer of many of the cruises, and specifically Executive Producer of the Disco Cruise. Alan, thanks for being here. How are you, sir?
Doing great, Jason. Good seeing everybody.
Right on. Well, first and foremost, before we dive into questions, I want to cover a couple of things for all the folks watching. And this is a little bit of a generic statement, but it's important that you all understand that we asked you to submit questions. Many of you submitted questions, which is wonderful. We encourage that. A lot of you submitted very personal, specific questions about your own experience or your own payment plans or this or that, things pertaining just to you and your moment, things that affect only you. So we will do our very best to make sure you get answered. Every one of those questions will be read and responded to. If they have not been responded to, if you have not been contacted already, someone will reach out from CTS, from the hospitality group that StarVista Live works with. Everybody will be responded to. This forum is to tackle the big questions, and I'll be generalizing some of them because they really kind of fit bigger pictures, if you will. So where we won't maybe get into some of your very, very specific questions, we will get generally into as many as possible. And answer what we can here. And I gotta say too, and I know Alan and Mike will back me up on this, the Ultimate Disco Cruise really is one of the most inclusive, broad-ranging, positive, wonderful groups of guests we have. And not to say the other cruises aren't, but Disco is really a melting pot of people, of likes, of wants, and it's really great to see so many great questions come out of this. The first thing I'd like to tackle, Mike, with you specifically, or Alan, feel free to jump in, obviously, is I think sometimes there's some confusion as to what it takes to build a charter. And by that, I don't necessarily mean people don't understand the process, but helping them understand how a charter is built, the length of time it takes to create a cruise charter, sometimes can help us understand when we start talking about postponements of cruises and how far out these decisions are made, et cetera. Would you mind talking a bit about the actual process of building a cruise, a charter like
Sure.
this?
I'd be glad to. We take it for granted, having done 50 or 60 of them, and but it is a little bit different. We start about 20 months out, 20 to 22 months out. We start talking to the ship company, Celebrity in this case, and we start talking about what week we'd like or a 5-day period we'd like. We go into things like we have nobody on before us, no other charter on before us, so we can load all our the famous stage, the floor that we load on that Alan was the spirit behind.
Studio 55.
Staging and all the lighting, and so that's really important, and we need the ability to get that on ahead of time. So start about 20, 22 months ahead of time. By about 18 months, we have a firm contract with the charter company, and it's basically a lease. So we own that ship for that week, certainly under their control. The ship always controls it. We're guests, but we effectively own every room. And whether it's full or it's empty, we pay the same amount. We license it for the full 5 days in this case. And any changes have to be gone back to the charter company, Celebrity, and we have to get their permission. They can change things, and sometimes they do. They change ports on us, and not for any other reason than sometimes just things happen, weather or whatever. So they change ports. They can tweak things. They generally don't change dates, and except in this case. So essentially we have a contract with them, and any change we want to make requires us to go back and renegotiate it. And so, to that end, in this case, we went back to them when we saw all the uncertainty unfolding, and we said, well, we think might not be the best idea to go in February. We think we like to move it. And so then we had discussions with them for a good six or 7 weeks. They're not difficult, they're just slow and deliberate. And so, the second we kind of knew what was going to happen, we announced it. But so we had the discussion started. Of course, simultaneously, we're talking to artists and finding out their feelings. We can't contract with the artist until we have a firm amendment with the charter company, but we can have some of the discussions. So sometimes you'll see the artists fall in line pretty quickly. We've had informal conversations, but the artists themselves need to allow us to move them. We just can't automatically move them to a different week or a different day, if you will. They have touring schedules, or they hold the cards, if so to speak. So that's basically the process we go through, and then all the planning happens at 18 months in, so that we have the lineup and we have the ports, itineraries, and we know, and then we build the schedule from there, which is painstakingly done over the 14 months ahead of the cruise, what happens on what day and what venue. And so, but again, it's a third party relationship. We have really no ability to move anything without the charter company's approval.
And so, I'm beating this horse a little bit here, but just to be very, very clear. So your relationship with the cruise line is one, so that the cruise line holds the cards here, and you don't get the choice. If you were to call Celebrity and say, I'm going to postpone this cruise a year, they don't have to acknowledge or honor that at all. They can choose to do whatever they want.
They can absolutely say no. Now they're good, decent people. We work with them for a long time, but it's a big company. It's formal contracts. There are lawyers and all kinds of people involved, and they prepare a lease for us, a formal lease for a reason. They take that week out of their portfolio, or otherwise they could lease it to somebody else, or they could sell it to the public. So it's a very formal and very is a 50-page contract that really specifies who's going to do what and when. So everything has to go through them.
Yeah, and I certainly don't mean to imply that Celebrity hasn't been wonderful, and I know, thank you for covering that. But I was just being very clear that it's not a StarVista Live decision at that point. It's a working partnership, but it is a cruise line decision as to how things get moved, when they get moved. And I think a big part, and something you could probably talk to for a moment, is a little bit of why not push it back 3 months, 2 months, 4 months? Why not? Why go a full year? And I know it's a multi-part answer, but if one of you wouldn't mind touching on that a little bit.
A lot of that's to do with the fact, when are they open? When is the ship going to be in that part of the world? Because at different times of the year, the ships move around, whether they go to Alaska, whether they go to the West Coast, they could sometimes go to Europe. So it's a matter of when will that ship that we want, that fits our customer base, the activities that we want on the boat, when will that boat be back in an available location that works for us? And it's open for us to rent again. Like Mike said, we'd like to get a week when the week before us is not a charter, where it's just a regular Celebrity cruise, which gives us some access to load on in advance, store equipment for the week. So when the last night of their cruise is on its way back to port, we're starting to build that stage, build the back line, build the production. So the first day of our cruise, we're all ready to go. And that first night and that first afternoon can come off with everything already set up. So it's a matter of where's the boat that's right for us, and the accommodations that we need as far as that week in advance in a location that we can work from. So, and like Mike said, and you said, it's a matter of us calling the cruise line and saying, we would like to do this. Will you grant us the right to do that? And if so, what are our available options? And as Mike said, we have a great relationship with them. We've worked with them a long time, Mike and I, and they've been wonderful with us, but we have a signed contract that they have to create an amendment and agree to allow us to do that.
The ship generally leaves the Caribbean mid-April. And so from mid-April into the fall, October, November, the ships are not in the Caribbean. And so then your other complicating factor is the artists. A lot of artists will tour right up till Christmas. And so it's hard to secure them. January, February, March are great months to secure artists because they're usually not terribly booked.
Right,
And
not as busy. Right.
yeah, I mean, otherwise they get on the bus and they go from place to place. They don't mind flying because they may only have a couple of gigs in each of those months. And so
Sure.
it's really the ship availability and the artist availability. And that's really why we pushed it a year.
And I worked in the cruise industry for almost 20 years, various positions, and I worked on board as an actual onboard employee for almost 15 years, 14 years there. It may be different now, so I'm speaking a little bit out of turn, but I do know for a fact that at that point in time that I was working there, cruise lines send their ships into Alaska and Europe, and it's almost, I want to say it's upwards of 60% of their annual income comes from Alaska and Europe and some of these, more exotic destinations or, outside of the Caribbean. So that has to drive up the price of a ship as well. I would imagine you're not getting a ship at the same cost, not to get too deep into it, but, it could greatly drive up the cost of the ship, which changes drastically the cost to the guest, et cetera, et cetera. Now, Mike, you've spoken before also, and I think it's important to note that another big reason to push back a year is really simply care for the guests. What's the point of pushing back a few months if COVID, if the whole situation hasn't been sorted through and rectified? And you've spoken to me at length about it makes sense to be as safe as possible and push out to a point where at least we feel and you feel as a company much more confident that the cruise lines will have everything in order and we'll be in a spot where we can likely do a cruise versus fingers crossed for June.
Sure. Once you make the decision to reschedule, you want to reschedule at least a year to give yourself plenty of time for all the challenges to be overcome. And so the longer you have, the more the probability that things will settle down. You'll feel good about, and we have not only guests, we have staff and we have artists as well. So, that's always the most important thing. And so we made the call. We said, a year is going to give us plenty of time. It not only gives us time to deal with the health and safety issues, and really the ships are going to come back and they're going to have some different protocols. So we kind of want to see what they are and work around them. And it gives Alan a whole year to plan a bigger and better. If there's 4 or 5 hours that he hasn't programmed in the middle of the night, he'll find a way to keep the disco open even later. So
that he will.
But I kid, but it's true. If we have the more time we have, the more we'll plan.
If we're making you wait a year, we're going to make it a bigger and better party.
Right.
That's for sure.
That's a fantastic promise. I like that. And now a distinction that's asked about 17 different ways within the questions from the guests is, isn't this just a cancellation? And it's not. Obviously, your contract with the cruise line was not canceled, correct? Could you explain what a postponement means and why it's important to everyone to understand it?
As we said early, when we discussed with the cruise line, if they would allow us to move this cruise to another date, it wasn't cancel, throw that contract in the trash can, give us another contract. They had to grant us a change of dates on the contract that we have. So we didn't cancel a cruise. They allowed us to move the dates.
They also kept the money we paid them. The way we pay for the ship is we start 14 months to 15 months ahead of time, and we start paying them, and those payments continue right up through a couple of months before we sail. So they have got their money long in advance, and they didn't give us a refund. It was the same price, same terms as before, and really it was just a rescheduling. And so we didn't reboot and start all over again. We just moved it. And they did give us some accommodations in terms of deferral of payments, which we passed on to our guests. Kind of whatever they gave us, we passed it on essentially to the guests. So there is but they didn't give us any money we paid them already back for sure.
Yeah. So it definitely is not a cancellation.
Well, and that's a common question here, and I understand the question. I'm sure you can as well. Guests have put their money forward. They feel like the cruise has been, if you don't understand the process, and no disrespect to anyone watching, I don't mean that you don't understand it, but if you don't understand the depth of it, it's not been canceled. It's been postponed. The cruise has been backed out a year. Celebrity Cruise Line did not refund StarVista. StarVista, therefore, then has no funds to then refund the guests. It's all still lined up. Now, can we talk a little bit about the, just for anyone who's kind of glossed over it, is not 100% sure. What is the new payment plan? It starts in January, if I'm not mistaken.
January 1st. So we're deferred the payments till January 1st of 2021, and it'll be a year up till January 1st, 2022, which will be 8 weeks before, 6 or 8 weeks before we sail.
Gotcha. And the new
Six-
dates,
six
sorry, go
months.
ahead, Alan.
6 months of no payments and
Yeah.
then picked up again there. So that, again, like Mike said, we're passing on some of the deferral that we got. Matter of fact, giving you more of a deferral, but what the cruise line gave us, because again, it's the same contract, we're just paying over a longer period of time.
Got it. I have multiple guests asking if this cruise is still sold out, or if it is sold out, and when or if, you know, and I know this, we don't want to be crass, I'm not making this a sales pitch, but people are asking, can they book and how do they go about it?
Yes, this cruise is not sold out. We have cabins available, and they can go to our website or call our reservationists and see what cabins are available. It's sold well. We have a lot of cabins sold, but there are cabins available. And as I said, giving me another year for me to play around with this will make it even more fun. So if you're thinking of it, there's cabins available.
And as of right now, the postponement, the new dates are February 26th to March 3rd of 2022. So February 26th to March 3rd of 2022. The next most popular grouping of questions we have is, how does StarVista Live, how does the Ultimate Disco Cruise promise to protect guests in terms of COVID concerns and social distancing and whatnot? Would you talk a little bit about, well, I guess there's a lot of facets here. Take that as a softball broad question, and then we can kind of go down from there. Mike or Alan, either of you.
Well, I'll just, Mike had said earlier, we're talking to the cruise lines and everybody in the cruise industry to find out what they're doing when they come back and actively cruise again. We will watch that carefully. As Mike said, there might be different protocols, and we will watch those protocols and incorporate everything that we can do to make sure when we sail, the safety of our passengers, our artists, and our staff are the number 1 priority and the number 1 thing on all of our minds to make sure is done as safely and as carefully as possible. And now we have an extra year to make sure of that.
Yeah, it's really well said. I think it's, you know, it's always a challenge because everyone would like perfect certainty as to when certain things will happen and, you know, what will be the protocols. The ships have not announced them, and the ships are working with the CDC and the industry CLIA, the industry group that represents the ships, and there'll be a set of rules that they'll all abide by. And I think probably by August they'll have those generated and you'll be able to see them and read them. They'll put them into effect, and then our bet was that in 18 months, not only will they be able to roll out all the changes, whatever those changes are, but they'll be able to manage them so that we can deliver the same experience. You know, we've started right from the beginning. We said it's got to be health and safety of our guests, our staff, and the artists, and we have to have the same experience. That doesn't mean that they can't check our temperature before we get on board. That can mean, you know, we will have a questionnaire. It might mean that the buffet will change a little bit, or they'll, you know, have health and safety on board, but that we'll be able to enjoy the music. We won't feel like, you know, only 5 people can be in the main theater at a time. You know, we expect that the ship is going to essentially run the way we want it to run with enhanced protocols. But they haven't announced them, and the second they do, we're going to pass them on and we'll work with them. We literally talk to them every day. And so if anything changes before that, we certainly will tell people. But I think they're taking their time to get it right.
And also, we don't know, hopefully there'll be a brighter world out there.
Yeah.
And we sail, and a lot of this conversation may not be quite as necessary as we feel it might be. These questions might not be as necessary as we feel they are today.
Well, I think too that it's important to note that as cruise lines roll out, and I know you kind of touched on it a little bit, you know, it's not, most cruise lines are saying September-ish, you know, and that's one of these from every cruise line. You know, their fingers are crossed that they're going to roll back out in September, but they're not exactly going to roll out, you know, 75 ships aren't going to hit the water, you know, 150 ships aren't going out with full cruising, full bore in September. I know you guys are both in close contact with the lines. What are they saying in terms, and I'm not asking you to break any confidences here, but what are people saying in terms of how cruise lines are going to roll out and what it's going to look like here in the early stages of cruising?
There'll be less boats. There's surely, if it's going in September and they pushed it back from, they originally planned May and June and July, there probably won't be full capacity. And there'll be less boats on the water because there'll be less demand as it starts to get back into a comfortable feeling. But the cruise lines know that when they come back, they have to come back and make people feel safe and secure on a cruise ship for them to succeed. And they will do everything and research everything they can to make sure to create that feeling and bring it back slowly to create that confidence in the consumer for our cruises, for their cruises, for the general cruising world.
I think a common, and I'm going to tag into you there, Alan, your point, what I'm hearing from my end of it is that, cruise lines are going to roll, they refer to it as tonnage is the common term in the industry, that, they're not going to roll full tonnage, meaning they're not going to send every ship back out on the water. You'll see cruise lines start with 2 ships, major cruise lines that have 20 some odd, they're going to start with 2, maybe 3, maybe 4, whatever it is, but it's going to be a small number. And they're also greatly going to reduce capacity. One of the numbers that I've seen thrown around a bunch is, between 50 and 65% of capacity in the beginning of sailings. Now, obviously, the reason I bring that up is obviously you can't do a charter, you can't do a full music cruise with 50 to 65%. It is a business at the end of the day that just doesn't work. And I think there's a misconception that, well, you could just go to a bigger ship. What's the biggest restrictions on going to bigger ships?
Well, have you ever been at one of our pool parties and you ever dance in our disco? You need an awful big disco to put 6 feet between every single couple.
Yeah.
So again, the industry will do what's right to bring that industry back and to keep their passengers safe and their crew safe, and we will do the same.
Well, I think too, and Mike, I think you were probably about to say it there. A common misconception is that as ships get bigger, all the venues percentage-wise stay the same, but they don't. We've all, the 3 of us, along with many other people within StarVista, have gone to look at other ships and other sizes and other lines. And as the ship gets bigger, people don't recognize the venues actually get smaller. Right. And and again, not to assume, but I assume that doesn't work purely for the fact that now you're asking your major artists to do not 2 shows, but 4 shows and 5 shows to try to accommodate everybody. And I assume that eventually becomes cost prohibitive. And
I mean, they'd have to do an early show, a medium show, a late show, a really, really late show, an unbelievably late show. You'd be
Which
doing
gives also less entertainment for the week because that main theater would be occupied by these acts for 4 different shows. Yeah. So the size ship that we use, the main theater holds half the boat, is a perfect size for us to get the, as Mike used the word before, for us to put on the experience we want, for our customers to get off that boat and say, that was great, phenomenal, and I'm coming back next year. We got to put on an experience that we feel gives them that sense of satisfaction for sharing their week with us. And this size boat makes it very possible for us to visualize the experience and then make it happen and accommodate the artist, the amount of shows the artists want to do.
I think I don't know if it's common knowledge, obviously the 2 of you know it very well because we've done a lot of homework and research in it, but the size of ships that we are on for almost all of the StarVista Live charters, and in fact, the vast majority of charters across the world, certainly if they're musically related charters, is about 2,000 to 2,200 passengers. You can't really go much above that because the ships that go, that's the last size of ship built that holds 50% in the dining room and 50% in the theater. Every ship built after that that's larger doesn't hold 50-50. It becomes a different ratio. So I know a lot of guests often have that question, why don't you go here or there? And it greatly relates to the type of charter you're doing. I think that's also.
And it's not just mechanical, though that's a huge issue. It's also the intimate feeling. I mean, when you start to get 4,000 or 5,000 people on a ship, as much as we all love that, it certainly has the schedule, it wreaks havoc on the schedule, but it also becomes a less intimate experience. And so 2,000, while it sounds like a lot of people, after a while, people get to know each other a little bit. There's just a warmer feeling, I think. So that's also part of it. It's not just running as many people as we can through. It's kind of creating the right environment.
Yeah, Mike
And
said on our cruises that have been around for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, it's like a family. It's their reunion is to get on the boat every year because they feel like it's that same 2,000 people, that same community. So the intimate feeling really works from a community standpoint and a family feeling.
yeah. And I think too that, and I know I've asked you both of this on stage before at different cruises, and I don't know if Disco's ever heard this answer, but you're more likely as a charter company to create a second version of a charter than you are to increase the size of the ship, purely as Mike is saying, to protect the intimacy, and Alan, to your point, to protect the experience and the type of ship you're getting. You're more likely to do two of something than you are to do one bigger version.
Sure.
Yeah. We have a couple questions in here, and I know we've handled this in other cruise chats. A land event. Is there a possibility to look at doing something on land as some of the other companies out there are looking at?
We consistently look at what we can do to give our customer base the greatest experiences. And we've looked at land. We have visited locations, as you know, Jason. You've come and visited locations with Mike and I and our staff, and we constantly looking to see what other things we can do, and we will consistently look at it. Nothing to announce now, but we will be looking at on a consistent basis how to take our brands, how to take our experiences, and put them at the best place we can do. We can do that for that customer.
Great. Two questions in here. One of them is, do we know which ship Disco will be on?
I think it was the Infinity. I'm trying to remember the Millennium class. The contract that says the Infinity, and so at this point, that's what the contract says. Like I say, the ship always holds the cards. So if they had a similar ship,
Yep.
possible, yeah, it's possible. But I think they have a contract with us, and so that's kind of where we're heading.
I think the main reason people are asking is the Infinity, where she's a beauty. It's a little older, and there was talks that Celebrity was going to go through the full refurbishment, and obviously this changes some time frames. Do you have any word? And again, not to ask you to talk shop too deep, betray confidences, but any word on whether or not those refurbishments will happen?
The last time I spoke to them, I didn't. They didn't have an update. They didn't have feedback. But I'm going to tell you, let me engage them on that and promise to get back to everybody and send out an email. So
Great.
It's possible that something has happened and they just haven't said anything to me yet. But let me take a look into it.
Great, thank you. Alan, I know you love this question because you had it on Disco multiple times. Why are some cruises 7 days and some cruises 5 days?
Well, I've had many people come up to me on the cruise ship and say, on the Disco cruise, and say to me, why don't we do 7 days? And I say to them, could you do 7 days of this? And they sit back, well, not so sure of that, because we have to set different programming in the afternoons. And Jason, you and I have had this laugh many times. We need to set nap time.
Yeah.
So that people get some relaxation. And we think it's a great way to party hard for 5 days. We don't want to, at this point in time, we don't know that we want to extend it. And we don't know if the party will have the same enthusiasm, the same experience, taking it to 7 days. But we're open, and we always listen to our customers and happy to listen to them, what they tell us and what they would like. But the feeling is right now, I think that 5 days feels perfect for this cruise.
And if I'm not mistaken, basically all the charters start as 5 days, correct? And then we move them to 7 once the demand becomes specific, or once it balances out, or once the guests ask for it. Could you talk a little bit about the decision to move some cruises from 5 to 7?
We've started a few of our cruises, Flower Power and Rocket Romance, as 5-day cruises, and we've had such overwhelming response and success that we expanded them after X amount of years into 7-day cruises. Again, they're not the high energy of a Disco cruise. There are nights there that the music is very mellow and very laid back, whether it's America or on the Rocket Romance cruise, or a Little River Band. So it's the kind of thing that we can extend to 7 days. Whereas Disco, also two things. Disco doesn't have the the quantity of artists that are still actively touring as some of our other genres. And again, it's a high energy, beats per minute kind of cruise. But again, the other cruises felt right to extend and worked out well to extend. So we're not saying no to disco. It's just at this point, we feel 5 days is really good.
That's why we also do the surveys. We survey generally at the end of each cruise, and that way Pete gives people a chance to kind of let us know what they feel. And it's often we think one thing, and then we hear from the guests a different thing, and we're happy to give the guests essentially what they want. The problem is if it's 50-50, or then you have to leave half the people out, and the other half of people are happy. But we definitely do that, and we definitely read all the comments as well. So anybody who really believes in 7, let us know, and we're happy to factor that in. But
well, I mean, I want to vouch for StarVista and you guys specifically. When I've worked with a lot of different companies and a variety of different charters, and you really do respond well to guests. And I recognize that there's always going to be a guest or two that didn't get the answer they want, therefore they feel like you're not cooperating. What makes some people happy is to be unhappy. I recognize that, and not every answer is going to make someone pleased. But at the end of the day, in terms of the overall charter experience and the overall cruise experience, I've seen you move cruises towards assigned seating. I've seen you move charters away from specific cruise lines to other cruise lines. I've seen you make some major decisions, and I've seen you move timings of things. I've seen you do major things based on guest feedback. And so I say this directly to the camera and anyone who's watching or does watch this. Those surveys are important. If you're happy and everything's status quo, that's fine. But if you have a point, please say it. Please say it. We can't. I know I speak for you when I say there's no promises you're going to do something, but the promise is it will be read, and the promise is it will be considered. And if it is a popular comment, if it is something that we find is a trend, you'll absolutely listen. So I absolutely want to commend you guys for doing really great things.
Mike and I have long and hard conversations about many subjects, but long and hard conversations about it's our customers' cruise. We may be the ringleaders. It's not our cruise, it's their cruise. And what our job is to make them happy, then happier, and then even happier than that. So we have to listen to them to get to that point. We bring some of what we bring to the table, and we hope what they bring to the table makes it an even better experience. So yes, we care very much about their feedback. We care very much about their opinion because they're the party we want to watch happen.
Amen. And I think it's important too that we do a quick little shout out to, there's a lot of wonderful relationships with travel agents, that have a lot of great feedback. And I know both of you rely heavily on travel agent feedback because they speak for a broader majority sometimes. And so a quick shout to all the travel agents out there that are a huge part of this relationship and, bringing a lot of business to us, and, and you guys and StarVista Live doing everything you can to make sure that every person they bring, of course, leaves satisfied and comes back the next time. So to all the continued cruisers and those travel agents.
We also have a call center, and we really talk to them 3-4 times a week. What are you hearing? What are some of the questions? What are some of the concerns? And so that really influences us because, that's directly hearing from guests. So we read every email, we look at every phone call gets responded to, and we get summaries of the trends and some of the issues that are coming up. And a lot of times, frankly, you don't know every question that may come up, and then you hear one, you say, oh, that's a great question. Then we'll do the frequently asked questions, we'll answer them so that people have a chance to see the answer online as well. So even those frequently asked questions are heavily influenced by the kind of questions people ask or concerns they voice.
Sure. Last kind of generalized questions that I put together. How do you choose artists for cruises? I mean, obviously we're talking disco right here. So how do you decide who fits a disco cruise and who doesn't? Obviously, disco has so many different, depending on where you're from, depending on your age range, depending on your affiliations, depending on, culturally, yada, yada. Disco means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. How do you decide what a disco cruise looks and feels like?
Well, I lived through the disco era. I'm kind of a music guy, so we know, first of all, we check out who's still performing well, who is the kind of personality that could be on one of our boats and interplay with the passengers and have some fun and not be a miserable character on the boat. So they need a lot. We look at a lot of criteria. Do they fit the genre? Does their music fit what this customer likes, still wants to hear? Will they fit in with our feeling on the boat, with our experience? And in disco, it's a great dance music. It's got to be great dance music.
Yeah.
But the era had some people who made some great ballads, like we're going to have the Stylistics, Russell Tompkins Stylistics next year. And I mean, when you went into a disco and they slowed it down and they want to play Betcha by Golly Wow or You Make Me Feel Brand New, the disco customer loved that song, loved that feeling. It was on radio at the same time. It was the top of the chart. So it's who made great dance music and whose music fits the era, the feeling, and the party. We do that for every one of our genres. Who fits that genre? Who's going to satisfy that customer? And whose performance is still great?
And do you have, I'm putting you on the spot, Alan, you specifically right here and now. Do you have a wish list for the disco cruise in terms of someone who hasn't agreed to do it or would maybe? Who's your wish list?
Mike and I keep a wish list for every cruise.
I know.
Every cruise is who we want, who we're still going to get, and we've been turned down many times, and we just keep asking. We take no for an answer for that year, and it starts all over the next year. So yes, we have a big wish list, and we continue to go back and continue asking. And many people who told us no in the beginning on many of our cruises have ended up saying yes and talking about what a wonderful experience it is. So we're stubborn. We keep going back, and yes, we keep a wonderful big wish list. And I'm sure every suggestion that any artist would have is already on our wish list.
We've sometimes asked 5 years in a row and gotten 5 no's, and the 6th year, magically the artist is okay. Or usually because the manager has another artist who was with us, or the tour manager, refers to us and saw it was a great experience. And so we don't give up. We keep going, and we'll do anything. I mean, we've left Fort Lauderdale a little late so an artist can get on and then bust to Key West and do a second show in Key West. We've done 2 shows on the island where they fly in, and anything we can do to tweak the itinerary, because honestly, some artists do not like to cruise.
Yeah.
We want to take that into account, and a lot of them do, but some of them don't. So you have to kind of work.
Some of them have heavy touring schedules that can only give us a day.
Yeah.
So we'll bring them in and do 2 shows on the boat and get them off because they have a busy touring schedule, but they're part of the genre, part of the feeling, and part of the experience. So as Mike said, we'll work to accommodate them to make our customers get a chance to see them and enjoy them.
And it actually brings up a great point about ports. How do you decide, and I had a couple of those questions. How do you decide ports to call? How do you decide where to go? I mean, obviously, as you're mentioning, some of that is dictated by certain artists.
Yeah, we keep a list the same way we keep a wish list on artists. We keep a list of where we've been to what islands on each and every cruise every year. We try to find new locations, new destinations, added some new excitement, knowing that we might have to come to a major port for an artist to come in and do 2 shows. We need a port somewhere during the week that we can get artists on and off, because all artists don't want to be on the boat for a full 5 days or a full 7 days because of their schedule. So we need an island that has easy airport access, hotel access, because we can put up a lot of artists who may come in for half the cruise and get on the boat or get off the boat at that time. So there's a lot of input that goes into picking our destinations to make it work for the cruise ship, the customers, and the artists.
Now, obviously, I think one of the last things that needs mentioning here is, disco cruise being postponed is not a unique experience right now. You guys have postponed, pretty much starting January onward. Would you talk a little bit about the experience of 21?
Well, actually, November 20, we moved a cruise from November 20 to November 21. And then we moved the January and February cruises from 21 to either late in 21, in the case of country, or into 22. Very small window in late 21. So yeah, we were able to move 1 or 2 cruises in there, but it's very, very limited. And so, yeah, we rescheduled just because it made the most sense.
And I have a couple of questions I'm guessing these are longtime guests of StarVista Live, but you know, I don't want to read them verbatim, but the baseline of them is, goodness forbid, what happens if StarVista Live goes under with all of the postponements in 21? How is StarVista Live maintaining, and can we be sure that there even will be StarVista Live cruises in 2022?
StarVista is part of a bigger company. If you've ever heard the name Time Life, is our company, and StarVista is one important division of our company. But the other part of our company happens to sell CDs and DVDs. I'm sure a lot of our customers have seen infomercials on television. We do a lot of other things and a lot of other business, and happily, a lot of parts of our business are having a very good year, even with what's going on. So StarVista will survive. We will be here. The company, as Mike said earlier when we were talking, we've been in business since 1961. We weren't there, but this company has been around and been in
Glad
business.
you clarified that.
Yeah. since 1961. Mike and I have been there for about 15 years, and we will be here next year. We will be here in 22, and this company will be in business. There's no worry or no threat of StarVista going out of business. We have a good, solid business and many other divisions in our company that does very well.
Now, again, I want to reiterate, thank you very much for clarifying that, Alan. I want to reiterate to anyone who's watching, if we do not answer your specific questions, remember, again, as I mentioned at the top, just in case you missed it, a lot of these are very personally specific to you. So somebody will contact you if they have not already, if you've not had a contact from someone at the hospitality group. Somebody will. Forgive us for not going too deep into individual, or this would be 3 hours of just one-on-one questions, which I know frustrates some people, but at the same time, we got to do our best to appease as many of you as we can. With that said, Mike, is there anything you'd like to say before we jump off here? Anything you'd like to say to the StarVista Live faithful and the disco cruisers out there?
Well, yeah, obviously we're incredibly disappointed when we plan a party and we have to delay having that party. It's, you know, like we say, it's 18 to 20 months. We plan it. We meticulously, you know, plan every little facet of it. Alan and I talk about artists all day long, trying to figure out how to get the right artist, who knows them, how do we get them on board. We'll change itineraries to make it happen. We're constantly looking to make it a better experience for the guests. And when we realized that we had to do this, it was with lots of disappointment, but recognizing that it was the right thing to do. And we'll all be together soon. We appreciate everyone's support. We know how much fun you had last year because we're there and we see it, and it's incredibly gratifying. And to, you know, have to go another year without seeing everybody's a little more than a little disappointing, but it's the right thing to do. And again, we appreciate everybody's patience with us as we work through this, like the rest of society is working through things we never thought of before, frankly.
And thank you, Mike, for that. And Alan, I'd say the same to you. Is there anything you'd like to say to all your disco faithfuls and your StarVista Live faithfuls out there?
Number one, stay safe, stay healthy. I'm going to miss you come February, because those 5 days are 5 days that I love and can't wait to experience again. And we'll think that the week that we won't have this year, we're going to make it double that much fun the following year, as I said before. And I want to see everybody back out there having fun, because we're going to miss this one. As Mike said, we'll be disappointed, but we have a lot to look forward to. So stay safe and come on and party on the disco cruise again.
Great message. I would leave by just reminding all of, certainly our disco guests, that, you know, one of the great things about the disco cruise, and one of the things that we talk about inside of StarVista Live a lot about the disco cruise, that it's not a black cruise, it's not a white cruise, it's not a gay cruise, it's not a straight cruise, it's not a man's cruise or a woman's cruise or a young cruise or an old cruise. It's not anyone's cruise. It really is everyone's cruise. Disco is one of the most inclusive, wonderful experiences that I've had, period, in all of cruising. It's a very unique 5 days, and especially as we go through some tumultuous times, I just ask everyone to remember that. Just love one another, treat each other with some kindness and respect and empathy, and let's do our best to get through all of this in the safest and healthiest way we can. So on behalf of Mike, Jason, and Alan Rubens and all of StarVista Live, I thank everybody for tuning in. I hope you gleaned some information out of this. Maybe you didn't know, and we answered in general as many of your questions as possible. And again, individually, we'll be getting back to all of you that submitted questions in a timely manner here. Thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Have a great rest of your day and week here, and we look forward to seeing you as soon as possible on a StarVista Live charter cruise.
Thank you, Jason.
Take care,
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you.
Thanks, Alan.